Hello and welcome to the Leadership Learned podcast, brought to you by the Inspirational Group. Each episode we examine how leadership behaviours, skills and attributes improve performance from the classroom to the boardroom. We discuss the latest issues, delve into the current thinking and provide tangible insights as we go beyond the clichés to prove that leaders are made, not born. In today's episode, we're talking purpose-driven leadership. And to give some context to people who may not be overly familiar with the term, studies have shown that being purpose-driven can have a huge impact on individuals and organisations. Harvard's Business Review, for example, claimed that companies with a strong sense of purpose outperform the market by 42%. Deloitte found that purpose-oriented employees are 54% more likely to stay at a company for 5 years and are 30% more likely to be high performers. Gallup research indicates that teams with a strong sense of purpose see a 41% reduction in absenteeism and a 17% increase in productivity. So a lot of stats there, but you think you can see why it's such a relevant issue and why we're talking about it today. And we'll be delving into exactly what it is, why it's so important, particularly in this day and age, what the benefits are to the leaders, their teams and the organisation, and of course, giving you all the good stuff that we normally give around real world examples, practical tips, actionable advice, etc., etc. So today I'm joined as usual by Rona McKenzie. How are you, Rona?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice big pause there as I hit the mute button.
Good to see you. And today we're really pleased to have with us, for his first time on the podcast, Simon Mann. Simon is a former Royal Navy officer and UK Armed Forces psychological operations expert. In his business career, Simon has been a consultant and CEO, leading transformation programs for multiple organisations. Amongst his many qualifications, he has a Master's with Distinction in Education, Leadership and Change, and postgraduate qualifications in Leadership and Sustainability. He is a Fellow of the Institute of Leadership and the Association for Coaching, and a member of the Association of Sustainability Practitioners. Welcome, Simon. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So we're going to start with the sort of the definition of purpose-driven leadership, and so Simon, how do we define purpose-driven leadership, and how does it differ, I suppose, from other leadership styles?
So I think in the past, leadership studies have been driven from very much the sort of the military leadership context. And we used to talk about the great man theory of leadership, and it was very definitely the great man theory of leadership. And clearly, thinking has moved on, and there's been a lot of research on what motivates people best, how they engage with leaders, the study of followership, and so on. So contemporary thinking on leadership is looking in great detail at the effect of purpose. And really the way in which we look at it is if we think about management as doing things right, making sure that things are scheduled, making sure that your organization's mechanics and processes work properly, we can think about leadership as doing the right thing. And that provides a sort of a set of criteria that help people to stay on track and make sure that the organization is focused on achieving the creating the value that it wants. Purpose-driven leadership is very much around understanding the organizational purpose and how the individual's efforts contribute to that, and also framing it in the context of that which individuals are trying to achieve, and how the individual's purpose and the organizational purpose align to create value. And then lastly, the concept of value is really important in the notion of purposeful leadership, because we believe, and a lot of the research suggests, that organizations can usefully consider the value that they create and how financial value is a byproduct of that. So the value that they create is in terms of the services and products that they bring to their customers and the impact that they have on society through their operations and their products and services as well. So really, the term purposeful leadership is around doing the right thing. It's around having a clear vision of success. And it's then about being able to communicate that in an ethically sound and characterful way to your people in order to drive better organizational value.
We'll come on to the sort of the benefits for individuals, teams and the organization. But I just wanted to quickly ask, whenever I hear purpose, I initially sort of think, well, there's purpose, there's a vision, there's a mission. Where does it sit within all of these different things?
Yeah, so quite often we see organizations at the strategic level having a purpose statement. And the purpose statement is really, it's the value that they want to create in the world. Their vision is then an articulation of what that looks like when they get there. And their mission is then the steps that they're going to take to create that journey. And I think it's very much, there's a lot of people will have read Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And it really is the why. The purpose is the why. Why do we exist as an organization? What value do we create to the society in which we operate and our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, and our supply chain and the people impacted by our operations?
Yeah, I think that makes it clearer to me. When you bring it down to the why are you doing this, that makes it easier on an individual level, a team level, an organization. If you just simply say, why are you doing this? Why are you coming into work today? It makes it a lot easier to understand.
And of course, that completely aligns to doing the right thing. I mean, we've had some very, very difficult organizational crises and dilemmas reported in the media just recently. Without naming individuals, there's a lot of very high profile examinations of organizational behavior going on. And you look at those and think, did they understand their why? Were the actions of people within those organizations driven by their purpose? Did they serve the long-term needs of the organization, or did they serve short-term value creation? And I think the jury will probably come in on the side of them not really understanding their why.
So we kind of that's given us a better understanding of it. And what are the key benefits of being purpose driven for managers and for their teams?
So I think it is that notion of it's about great leadership, and I think all of us on this podcast, we talk, all of us, don't we, about great leadership, and we love great leadership, and in humanity is still continuing to define what great leadership looks like, and at the same time, leadership that understands purpose, leadership that's driven by purpose at an individual and organizational level, means asking different questions. It means behaving in different ways, and it means aligning to that ethical framework that delivers better results. So the benefits are people feel more engaged, people feel more heard. The stakeholders of the organization realize that the organization is trying to deliver something positive to society. And that positivity in society is a really important point in purpose-driven leadership. It links very much to the growing B Corp movement, where people, profit, and planet are considered in balance, and purpose-driven leadership fits very nicely around that notion of the fact that organizations can be a force for good, and it helps align them. And of course, people feel better about working for organizations where that's clearly the intended outcome.
And is that a key part of how it makes someone a better leader, because people want to work for you more because you understand them more?
Yeah, 100%. And it's about the leader being clear on the purpose and the why, alongside the leader taking the time to understand their team and their purpose and their why and what the alignment looks like. So I think, we talk a lot about organizational purpose, but it absolutely is important at the individual and the team level. If you're running a project team, what is the why of the project? Are you really clear on the outcomes and the purpose of the project? I definitely in the past have worked on projects that lost their way and weren't delivering on their why, and ended up being, going on too long when perhaps they should have been stopped. A real, that ability to understand the why and understand if it's still valid and understand the purpose of the initiative you're delivering on, and to make a decision to stop it sometimes if it no longer meets the purpose, is absolutely vital in modern leadership, and a challenge that faces us all, particularly when we're dealing with a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. That we've all in our lifetime seen ridiculous amounts of change, the acceleration of technology, the global disruptions that we've had, the current conflicts and supply chain disruptions, pandemics. It is a crucial facet of individuals and leaders to understand why, and to be able to make the adjustments that they need to actually ensure that the organization is doing the right things.
I like what you said about making sure that you understand your why, whether you're as an individual or part of a team or in the organization. But I suppose a lot of them, there could be a problem for people in clearly articulating that why, because it might not be quite so clear for a lot of people. So how can leaders sort of identify and articulate a compelling purpose?
So it's a really great question. So I think, we again, I'm a passionate believer in the power of coaching as a leadership style, and would absolutely support that. And the coaching approach is about, to quote Stephen Covey, seeking first to understand. It's about asking great questions. So actually, without sort of feeling that you have to generate it, start a conversation. Ask, what is our why? Learning from what we've done and what we want to do. Why is that important to us? What does it mean for people? What does that mean for our stakeholders? What does great look like? What impact will we have on the world? How will that make us sustainable in the long term? Because that will continue to test and adjust. So that approach of asking great questions and really listening to the answers, and then sort of and then asking again, and why is that important? That really does help refine those pieces. Now, of course, the other side is that you can have founder-led organizations and entrepreneurial organizations and startups where the leaders have a very, very clear sense. They start the organization because there is a specific impact that they want to achieve in the world already. And again, there's lots of evidence to suggest that those organizations are really successful because they start with their purpose. But it doesn't mean that all organizations can't take a long, hard look at their why and reframe it and use it as a rallying point, as a North Star. Similarly, in leadership conversations and working with people in your team, taking the time to understand what motivates them, how do they see their role in the organization, how does their role fit in to delivering it from their purposes terms and from the organizational purposes terms is a really great way of getting to understand your team better and working out what they may need support in.
Strikes me that taking the time to do this is really important. People would need to be reflective and self-aware, both at an organizational level, but at a purpose, as a kind of personal level. And so if I understand the organization's why, and where the organization wants to go, my contribution to that, my motivators might be very different. And so equally, that works both ways, of how well do I know myself and how I fit into this jigsaw of the organization, and how well do I know the people I work with and their whys, so that we understand our similarities and differences. Because it feels like that, then we're able to understand that we're all working towards a common goal. We just might be driven in slightly different ways and doing slightly different things, but together we are definitely stronger.
No, it's a great point. And of course, when you have that understanding, it improves communication, it improves teamwork, and has all sorts of other benefits outside of the achievement of the goal. It's about the way in which that team works together to achieve the goal.
I think that communication point is a very, very good one, because from what I can gather with all this, there's no way you can be purpose driven and if you don't have great communication, because you need to find out all this information in order to make it purpose driven. And I was thinking, Rona, that I'm guessing in your career as an educator, you've had lots of experience with being driven by purpose.
Absolutely. It was what I was thinking about earlier, that leaving education after 20 years and working then in the corporate sector, I suddenly realized that the motivating factor of making money for an organization just didn't sit right with me. And so I'd be led down paths in luxury jewelry where I was most concerned by the experience of the client and the value we gave them in taking, inherited jewelry and turning it into something beautiful. So we retained the memory of family and so on. That drove me every day. And the numbers were the incidental part that I had to make sure I never forgot about, because suddenly they were much more important. And it's not to say that money doesn't matter in education. We can't be in debt in schools. You have to balance the books. You're in a lot of trouble if you go overspend, but it's not about that. That's a kind of a secondary thought, in the sense of I'll let someone else worry about that, because it's all about the experience that the children have and the progress and the journey that they experience. And so it is that balance. And I think when we understand what motivates people in our team, we can then almost take the why and look at it from different kind of viewpoints and perspectives to say we all share the same why, just our route to achieving it might be driven by slightly different things. And what's most important is that we all understand how much value each of us brings. So my colleagues who are driven by ensuring that the financials are the best they can be, whatever that looks like, and that's really valuable. And as as valuable as my maybe desire to make sure that the client experience is the best, and so on. And so, yeah, knowing your own purpose, but also understanding why it differs to others, as Sam said, would definitely increase our ability to understand and communicate with one another. And as leaders, we all lead in teams. Everyone takes a leadership role at some point. We must understand how we can alter our language so that other people hear it and it resonates with them. If I constantly talk about doing the best for the students or the delegates, it'll wash thin with some because it doesn't make sense. It's not in their kind of hierarchy of importance at the top. So tweaking what I say and how I frame it is really important.
Mm. No, I mean, taking that point, so much of leadership is about a balance, and that I think is, the purpose of things like the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet is about balance. And management studies around things like the balance scorecard for Kaplan and Norton, which a lot of people have heard about, that is about working out how you balance the interests of shareholders, investors, staff, and the sort of the external societal environment. So the notion of purposeful leadership and purpose-driven leadership has grown on that kind of thinking, and the recognition that in order to create an organization that lasts into the long term and continues to create value, leaders have got to understand the balance. And as Rona says, that's equally important in a jewelry business as it is an educative environment. It's always about weighing up the options available, and sometimes the better of two choices, or sometimes the lesser evil of two choices, and that having that clarity of purpose provides a really useful framework for leaders to make those decisions, and in fact individuals at every level in the organization to actually think about how they balance their priorities.
It's a really good point, because there was some research recently I was reading, and I can't remember where it was from, but we were talking about the next generation coming through, and how what they're looking for in the organizations they work with and for is around a clear purpose, but also that their actions support that purpose. So it's not a strap line and some lovely values and it's all grand and wonderful until you get in the door and realize that what they do on a daily basis does not match that. And I think in the past, maybe employees might have said, oh, well, I have a secure job and I'm doing roughly what I want to be doing, so that's good enough. Whereas young people coming out of education today are saying, no, we're either in this, doing it purposefully, or we're not. And so their notion will be, well, I'll go somewhere else. They're not wedded to the organization through kind of that thick and thin of not being true to their purpose. So the clarity is so important, and then the consistency of our daily actions and that ability to look at ourselves and say, are we achieving our purpose? Are we behaving in a way that supports where we're intending to go? And of course, we get it wrong, if wrong's the right word. And so, but it's that ability to be able to look and say, maybe we are heading down the wrong track. Maybe this isn't contributing to our purpose, and what should we do differently? What will we do next? So the ability to stop and reflect and take action. I think the danger often is that we're in such a hurry to do everything that time and honesty, there's not space for it.
No, it's really interesting, and so I think there are a number of things that come off the back of that we haven't touched on yet that are benefits of purpose-driven leadership, and absolutely to build on Rona's point, it builds trust, because that congruence between stated purpose and the relevance to a person's role engenders trust in the organization, which is a key building block of performance. It also supports performance more roundly, because in a knowledge economy where people are on a day-to-day basis deciding how best to allocate their time, and I think we'd all sort of recognize individuals have to manage their own performance in conjunction with great conversations with their leaders and the rest of their team. So again, having that clear reflective and sensible conversation around purpose drives how people allocate their time and the performance levels that they put in. It also supports innovation, because if people are clear on the trust, or if they have the trust and they're clear on their purpose and the organizational purpose, it actually gives people much greater freedom to understand where improvements might sit, and in fact the opportunity to offer those improvements. So there are some really great subsidiary benefits in terms of trust building, innovation, and sort of employee engagement and retention that are driven by the way of working that true purposeful organizations exhibit. And exactly as Rona says, it's about actually cascading that approach and the character and the ethics that it requires through the organization and holding yourself to account for it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the benefits to the individuals, and certainly, that point about innovation is a really good one, because it's not something it's kind of obvious that it would help engagement. I can totally see that, but then the innovation thing, it makes sense, but it's not something you'd initially think about. But moving more now to the how, what are the strategies leaders can use to align their team's goals, their team's purpose, I should say, and the organization's purpose?
So we talked about coaching earlier, and I think that's, that a coaching-based approach to leadership has been demonstrated to have significant benefits. So the ability to have a coaching conversation around performance goals and how they align to the organization's outcomes is a key start. So in terms of your objectives on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what are your plans? These are the outputs that we need. What might those look like? And having really good clarity around how outputs conform to the team's plan and deliver on the purpose, and having really open conversations around that, and doing that in a supportive way as well. I think quite often we find that sort of difficult problems roll downhill, and actually by being purpose driven, it makes a conversation around what good outputs look like and good outcomes are much more open. There's then the conversation around the fact that in a constant, never-ending, changing world, what might the team need to learn? What research might the team need to do? What might they need to learn about each other to achieve their purpose? And understanding that actually quite a lot of the challenges that organizations face require learning, and that's okay. Sometimes we don't know the answer, but the purpose drives our need to find the answer. And then I think lastly, it's recognizing that quite a lot of the problems that we solve are difficult, and that if the purpose is worthwhile, we don't always have the answers. So sometimes people need support. The team needs to, and individuals need to, can usefully understand that they've got a supportive environment, and that that there are people they can go to ask questions, or discuss and be coached on how they solve their problems. So I think it can work at multiple levels. Ultimately, it's all around delivering the right outcomes for the organization, but organizations that align to a purpose that people can buy into.
And what has to be in place at the organizational level for this to work?
So I think, that a broad acknowledgement of the principles of purpose driven leadership, an acceptance of a coaching culture, and I mean, to some degree, an interest in how leadership works. A recognition that great leadership can be, an enabler. A word which I really don't like. I'm going to have to find a better word for enabler. But great leadership makes a difference. It really does. Move the dial in terms of organizational result. And then there is that notion of a supportive environment where people hold each other to account and allow and recognize that everybody makes mistakes, but at the same time looks to support each other on that leadership journey.
So what's your problem with the word enabler?
Do you know, it's that kind of, I don't know, it's just like it sounds like something that, like a screwdriver. I don't know I don't know what I mean.
Yeah, it feels like it's like the fuel or the...
It's like synergies.
We definitely won't be going down that route. What you just said did make me think perhaps this is another example. We've come up with a few on this podcast of the difference between leadership and management.
It did make me think
management is just imposing, whereas leadership should be purpose driven. That's if you're leading people, you should know how to lead them and how how they're going to respond.
Yeah, and it's there's some very common phrases around it. You manage things. You lead people, and people are led by purpose. I think it comes down to that very simply. Plus, you can have a brilliantly managed organization that's managing itself off a cliff. Again, there's some cracking organizations of examples of that in the past. You can manage things really, really well and still be heading in the wrong direction. It's about doing the right things. And having that purpose as your North Star, it really changes direction. And it's again, there's some really great examples. You look at sort of in the transition to net zero, there are a lot of carbon producing organizations that are framing their purpose around enabling people to have access to energy. That is very different from digging dead dinosaurs out of the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something else I wanted to come on to, is that side of things. And I suppose in some ways you'd call it the sustainability leadership, but the bit where we're talking about the planet, and just to say a little bit more about how that can become a part of an organization's purpose.
Yeah, so I think it's inherent in there's some great research out there that sort of talks about the purpose goes beyond the organization. And often that's seen as a societal impact. And of course, society exists in balance with the planet. So I think, sort of, so the B Corp philosophy is very much that an organization's purpose recognizes the fact that it's there to create value. And actually, organizations can create value for humanity, the environment in which they operate, and the economy, and that those things need to be balanced. If an organization creates value at the expense of the planet, then there may be short-term prosperity for some of the stakeholders of that organization, but the social license to operate at that organization may be challenging. And again, we've seen some really good examples of that. So unless you balance value creation in the context of people, the planet, and the economy, you challenge the long-term sustainability of your organization.
And again, I've seen research on this saying that young people, people entering the workforce today, are looking for that in their organization. They don't want to just see a statement. They want to see, like evidence that a company is actually working towards those goals.
I think that's where your purpose needs to be very clearly defined. And whilst we want to be ambitious, it can't be so unrealistic that people can't buy into it. So a level of ambition, but then a sense of, as Sam was saying earlier, and how will we get there? We might not know all the steps, but we know where we're starting. And then if we think of the domino run, we can push the first couple of dominoes and we'll work out where the next are coming. But where we're heading to is something that feels almost within hand's reach as we become more creative and innovative and seek new solutions.
Our young people really understand some of the trends, some of the global trends that we're seeing, and some of the wicked problems that the world faces, and they recognise in a very, very wonderful and laudable way the fact that there are different ways of being and different ways of working in organisations, and the importance of the purpose and impact that organisations have.
Yeah, because they're starting to ask the questions of, why am I learning this, given what technology can give me? Why am I being examined in this? What value will that add in my life, other than jumping a hurdle or getting into another course or job? We know that people buy people, we employ people for who they are, and we know that they can learn stuff, but actually their character, their values, their purpose and direction, that's really what we employ. And so, kids are starting to say, what's the point of all of this? And I feel like they're quite confused. And actually, if we just let them work it out, we would do much better. As an 11-year-old girl said to me last week in Abu Dhabi, the reason we need to not multitask is because we can't be in the moment when we're multitasking. We can't hear what people are saying. We can't get underneath the words and understand what they really mean. And so it causes stress, and stress is not good for us. So multitasking is not helpful. And the teacher that was in the back of the room said, where did that come from? I was like, yeah, these kids know way more than we give them credit for. And we don't always listen. We're in too much of a hurry to teach them stuff.
Taking that point, building on it, there is the ongoing debate around the purpose of education. What is the purpose of education? And I think that that speaks to it exactly. If the purpose of education is to equip young people with all that they need to thrive in a challenging and ever-changing world, then are we providing the right things in the educative environment to support that? And it's clearly a very live debate, but it is very usefully driven by purpose.
And that's where I think that one of the dangers, Matt, is that businesses get stuck in that this is how we've always done it. This has always been the purpose. Let's just keep going, rather than stopping the clock and saying, hang on a minute, are we doing the right thing? If we were honest about education, we'd be stopping the clock and saying, the first thing we need to be teaching in schools is much more technology and the use of technology. We need to understand it rather than banging on about, reciting, regurgitating facts on history, and that's not me being an anti-historian. But actually, so much is at our fingertips. If we want to equip young people to work in the world when they leave school, they must be able to utilize all of the tools that are around them and work out how can we use them best. So yeah, education would do well to stop the clock and look. And unfortunately, driven by the government, it means that's pretty tricky. But organizations aren't bound by that. They've got much more freedom to stop the clock and be honest and take the time to say, is what we're doing adding value in the world? What's our impact? Why do we exist? And what shall we do differently? And importantly, asking that of everyone. So if that 11-year-old girl is the example, don't assume that the big people have the answers, whether that be big in terms of age or in terms of experience. Everyone has a valuable opinion and will give you such a different perspective that when we come to consider our purpose, everyone needs to have a kind of seat at the table to share their views so that we can be really informed about what next.
All right. So that's all the good things. Now let's take a look at the other side of things. And a statistic that I found quite interesting was McKinsey did a study, and in it they said that 85% of execs and upper management said that they are living their purpose at work, whereas 85%, exactly the same amount, of frontline managers or employees are unsure or disagree that they are living their purpose at work. So given the fact that there potentially will be resistance to this style of leadership, people who are used to command and control and who believe that that's how they get the best results, what are the challenges that leaders and organizations are likely to face when they instill this purpose-driven leadership styles?
So it's interesting numbers. 50% of surveys are inaccurate. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That so that survey is saying that people saying that they're not necessarily living their purpose. I'm not sure that they were saying they were objecting to it, and I wonder whether that as people become more senior, as Rona was saying, they know themselves better. They're clearer on the roles that they want to take and how they deliver on it. So as people gain more experience, they're better able to find the right path that leads them into that purpose. But it does lead to a challenge of implementation, and in terms of quite often, an individual's purpose might be very different from the organizational purpose, and if you're delivering on the front line, perhaps in a sort of a less experienced role, it might be difficult to see how your purpose does align. And I'm almost loath to go to it, but I'm going to go to the classic urban legend of the cleaner at Cape Admiral, where arguably the cleaner brushing out the sort of the Apollo design center would have thought that his purpose was just to get in, do his job, get his check and go home, whereas in fact he recognized that by making sure that the space center was spotlessly clean, it was creating a safe environment for the astronauts and therefore enabling people on the moon. So it is a challenge, and sometimes leaders may find it difficult to find that alignment between an individual's purpose and the organizational purpose. And at the same time, it can be overcome by just taking an interest, by understanding the individual's purpose. And that might just be to make enough cash to feed and clothe the family, and depending on the organization. At the same time, recognizing that there is value in the organization's purpose and therefore sustainability in the organization, and the fact that the organization builds trust through that conversation and encourages open communication and seeks the team at all levels to innovate and improve the way that they work as a result of conversations about purpose. I think those obstacles can be overcome.
When we think back to COVID and the pandemic, when we went into lockdown, lots of people suddenly stopped the clock and had the moment to say, why am I doing what I'm doing? How is this adding value in my life? When I was 30, I made 30 challenge lists and I did 30 things. And when I was 40, I did 40, and I'm about to be 50 next year, and I'm not writing a list of 50. I've written one sentence, which is, when I'm 60, what do I want? What difference do I want to have made? And so that is my why. Why do the next 10 years exist for me? And so I almost feel like the pandemic, what it gave us was that time to reflect and for people to think about, why are they doing these things and what would they really like to be doing? And there, as Sam says, we can identify our purpose. And then we are affected by all the other factors in life. We can't just change jobs. We can't just move. There's so many barriers in the way that mean people might not feel like they're quite yet aligned. But it's important to know how far aligned we are and what do we want to do differently to be more aligned.
Right. Well, I think we've hit a lot of the targets that we were aiming for with that, and I just wanted to end by talking about, if people have been interested in this today, if it struck a chord with some people and they wanted to adopt a purpose-driven approach, what are some of the initial steps they can take to work down that journey?
Sure. So, as I say, that, really having an open conversation about purpose and being free to engage and ask questions about the why and play around with it and do it at a team level or an individual level, do it in line manager conversations. All of that starts the conversation around purpose. Do a bit of reading, or there's some great podcasts out there on purpose-driven leadership. This is one of them. We at Inspirational Group, we are thoroughly invested in purpose-driven leadership, and we have an approach that we apply where we can look at, right from the strategic level down to how teams operate. And there are some great developmental interventions that we do that drive thinking and engagement with the notion of purpose and character and organizational ethics, self-understanding, and so on. But the fundamental starting point is do a bit of learning. Read around the subject, ask yourself what's important to you, ask what your why is, and ask whether your organization's why is clear enough. And if not, what might you do about it?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good place to leave it. And I think we will. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more discussions about this in future episodes of the podcast. Simon, thanks a lot for your time today. Hopefully see you on the podcast again. Rona, I definitely will be seeing you again. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Learn podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics and issues discussed today. You can find us on LinkedIn by searching Be Inspirational, or email us at info@beinspirational.com. If you want to find out more about Inspirational Group and the work we do in leadership development, coaching, education, and change leadership, you can visit our website at beinspirational.com. We'll see you next time.